Talk Radio 790 KABC, the John Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wangs in Culver City.
John, the Palisades fire is raging. It is very dangerous. There are mandatory evacuation orders, and making that even more difficult is the fact that right now, Sunset Boulevard at Palisades Drive is impassable thanks to about 100 abandoned cars blocking the road.
I'm looking at video right now from West Hollywood. There is a fire that is raging very close to where the densely populated communities are in West Hollywood. If you're in West Hollywood right now, certainly anywhere in an area that's being evacuated, get out of Dodge if you can. And if you're not in an area that's being evacuated, certainly pay attention to the news, pay attention to the radio, pay attention to your phone, wherever you get your information, because this situation, given the strong winds in California today, could certainly get out of control quickly.
The latest from Kevin Tripp in the KBC newsroom, LAFD Fire Station 23 is on fire.
It's a very, very dangerous day, so stay vigilant out there. 800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the author of Behind Closed Doors, available online at Amazon.com. He's a former speechwriter for Presidents Nixon and Reagan. He's also a contributing columnist at the Wall Street Journal, and he's got a new one out right now about whether or not Vice President Kamala Harris will be the next governor of California. Ken Khachigian, welcome.
Hi, John. Good to be on your show as always.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. So, in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, you batted around the idea that Kamala Harris could come home to California and run for governor. What's your take on that?
Well, she doesn't have many options. For the last 21 years, as I say in my column, she's been surrounded by staff. She's had people taking care of her ever since she was a city attorney back in California. She's had staff supporting her as deputy, as attorney general, and as the district attorney, and as U.S. senator. So she's had people coddling her all this time. As vice president of the United States, she's flying around on Air Force Two. She's had people serving her in the vice president's residence. She's had people chauffeuring her around, and all of a sudden she's going to be returning home. And after Secret Service protection ends on July 20th of this coming year, she's got nobody taking care of her, so she's going to have to look at some options about what she's going to do with her life. Now, she was a practicing attorney back in the day, and she has an inactive law license, so she's got limited options on what to do with her life. And one of them is to activate her law license and practice law and join one of the big law firms in California and make a lot of money, maybe become a lobbyist or get on some corporate boards or foundation boards. Or she has two other options. She can start thinking about running for president again in 2028 and put together another campaign, which would be difficult because then she's running against Gavin Newsom and all the other potential candidates. Or she can think about running for governor, where she would have a built-in lead against all the other opponents. So that was the thesis of my column, because the current polls in California have her leading everybody. So that's an option for her, which I think she can consider. But I don't think she'll end up doing that, frankly. And I cite that she should take advice from my old boss, Richard Nixon, who had to make that decision back in 1961 after he left the vice presidency after losing to Jack Kennedy in the 60 elections. And he wrote about it in his memoirs, which I helped him. I was a researcher and writer for him, and back when he wrote his memoirs, and he wrote about this, and how he agonized over the decision about running for governor in 1962, and I think he ran for all the wrong reasons, and he wrote about that in his memoirs, and where he really didn't think he wanted to be governor. He, in his gut, he didn't think it was not the right job for him. It was the wrong job at the wrong time, and he was being pushed to do so by people that gave him advice to do it, and so I think Harris may be faced with some of those same decisions, and it'll be interesting as to what path she takes.
Well, there are two different things I think she's got to look at. One is, can she win? Because if you don't win, then why bother? And I think the answer to that question is yes, because the field of candidates right now is relatively weak. Most people don't know Lieutenant Governor Lainey Kanalakis or State Senator Tony Atkins or Superintendent of Public Instruction Tony Thurmond or the former Controller Betty Yee or any of these people. Yeah, no kidding. So she'd be the tallest building in Omaha. The second question she has to ask herself is this: does she have the skill set for the job? And I think the answer to that question is easy, and the answer is no. Because the state of California is a basket case right now. We have an insurance crisis where people can't buy insurance to insure their homes or their business. Soon, automobile insurance is going to be hard to obtain as well. We have a homelessness crisis. We have a crime situation that's totally out of control. We have a budget that is out of whack right now. We've got a bullet train that is a boondoggle. There are a lot of problems here. And if you are occupying that seat in that position and you don't have a clue, then guess what? It's going to be a complete train wreck. And you're going to get blamed, and whatever prospects you think you had to be president are going to evaporate into smoke because people are going to judge you based on your performance as governor of California, and that's not going to go well. I think she's better off finding something else to do, because if she's the governor, this state's going to hell.
I think you're absolutely right. Plus, I think, John, I don't think all those other candidates are just going to get out of the primary necessarily. I think maybe one or two or three of them will stay in the primary, and she could get cut up pretty badly. They're not going to necessarily concede the primary tour. Nixon had the problem. He had Joe Schell running to his right, who damaged him very badly in the primary in '62. And even if she comes out of the primary, she can get cut up by people in her own party who can attack her for not running a great presidential campaign. And you're right, even if she did become governor, she's going to inherit a train wreck. And who would want to be a governor that's worse than Gavin Newsom? And that would be a low bar to rise to. So why would you want to end your career with that kind of record? And instead, you could go around, you could give speeches, you could make good money, you could travel internationally, you could write some books, you could grow in stature, and maybe even start teaching some classes somewhere, and come out looking much better than you did. And in fact, she might even grow intellectually, which if it's possible. I'd love to advise her if she'd pick up the phone and call, and I think she could end up much better than she would if she ran for governor.
Fun fact, Joe Schell is Barbara Stone's father, who is a friend of the show, appears on the program quite a bit. He was not only a candidate for governor against Dick Nixon, he was the Assembly Republican leader and a star football player over at the University of Southern California.
Right.
Let's talk about Joe Biden, because over the weekend there was a story that came out saying that Joe Biden privately is upset with himself for getting out of the race, that he thought he could have done better than Kamala Harris and potentially even defeated Donald Trump in the general election. What do you make on that revisionist history from Joe Biden?
See, I think Mike Tyson would have won that last fight if he was 25 years old. No, I think that's really sad on his part. I think he should just bow out quietly and leave the presidency more dignified instead of making a fool of himself with comments like that. He even after Kamala Harris became the nominee, he became even more inept in his presidency. He made more foolish comments. He looked more inept in his public appearances. His wording at his public performances were difficult, and so just the record showed very basically that he could not have run a campaign that was even come close to her inept campaign. So I don't know why he would say something like that other than to salve his own ego. But you know, it's Joe Biden. I think was hurt by the fact that he was shoved out the door by Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama, and maybe he's just trying to patch over the wounds of what happened. And you know, after all, he's still president of the United States. But I think he should just enjoy what the 4 years he had and slip away on Air Force One and to Delaware and enjoy his post presidency. But comments like that make him look really foolish, John.
Over the weekend, Chuck Schumer, the Senate Democratic leader, went on Meet the Press and was asked about his remarks that he made during the campaign when he said that Joe Biden was as sharp as he's ever seen him. But on camera, he's stumbling and bumbling and falling upstairs. But behind closed doors, he's doing advanced calculus. And, the wit on him. I mean, he can just entertain you with riddles all day long. He was asked by the host, Christian Welker, about those remarks, if he was being truthful when he said it. He also claimed that any suggestion that Joe Biden was a step behind where he used to be was right-wing propaganda, and maybe even propaganda coming from the Russians. What do you make of this essential lack of coming clean from people like Chuck Schumer or Kamala Harris or even Nancy Pelosi publicly won't say that Joe Biden is demented or is not capable of doing the job? They lied to us for a very long period of time, and there doesn't appear to be any consequences for those lies.
Well, let me tell you my take on this, John, and I'd like to write about this in the near future. I think this is a very serious cover-up, and we shouldn't be putting this aside. Polite company now is saying, as the Wall Street Journal pointed out in this exhaustive investigative study they did, that dozens and dozens of people in the House and the Senate and in the executive branch now admit that he was mentally incompetent, all during these international crises. And here he was carrying the nuclear football. This is a massive cover-up. Is much, I was there during Watergate. This is much, much worse than Watergate because you had the possibility of international war. You had a possibility of nuclear proliferation. And you had the press secretary day in and day out for at least 2 years and maybe 2.5 years lying repeatedly to the people of America that the president was compos mentis. Now, these lies by Pelosi, by Schumer, by people in leading major House and Senate committees, my feeling is there should be, just as there was with Watergate, there should be a Senate Select Committee set up by Senator Thune to begin an investigation looking at all the emails and communications within the White House, between Pelosi and Schumer and everybody within the executive branch, the private emails and communications where they were actually saying to each other that the president is not competent, because this cover-up, to me, was on the edge of criminal activity, and we can't be putting this aside, because if it was an actual violation of U.S. criminal code laws, it reached the moral criminality, in my judgment, and the Senate ought to look into it with a select committee that exposes this very rapidly.
How long do you think it'll be before someone in that administration writes a tell-all book about just exactly how bad things got behind closed doors, who was actually running the country, and probably some battle stories that many of us would like to hear about?
Oh, I guarantee you they're being written right now, and that the publishing houses have reached out to at least 3, 4, or 5 of the top people within the administration, and then they've booked contracts with them, and that the agents are working very hard to get advances, and those they're rushing as quickly as possible after January 20th to get these out as fast as they can, and these tell-alls will be very damaging. And that's why I say there ought to be an investigation, because these tell-alls will expose what I call the criminality of the cover-up. That's very, very serious, because at the same time they were covering us up that the press secretary was lying, that Schumer was lying, that Pelosi was lying, that there was a war going on in Ukraine, that China was threatening in the Taiwan Straits, that there was potential problems in Latin America, that you had border security issues, you had drugs flowing into America, and here you had a president who couldn't think straight at any given day. And but they were all lying about the fact that he could actually conduct business in a common sense way. And to me, that is a very dangerous thing that was taking place in America at the time.
How big of a problem do you think is the gerontocracy? And I say that because it's not just Biden. We had Dianne Feinstein die in office. She was out of it for the last several years, maybe even longer, of her term as U.S. Senator here in California. I know people who have worked with Congresswoman Grace Napolitano, who represented the San Gabriel Valley area in Congress for a long time. She's not all there. They all make it very clear, and she hasn't been for some time. You look at these pictures from Congress. You got Pelosi walking around in a walker. She broke her hip when she was in Europe. You have Mitch McConnell being pushed around in a wheelchair. You had, I don't even know how many members of Congress die in the last term. You had some who lost their committee chairmanship because they're believed to be demented, and they're in wheelchairs now being pushed around by staffers. How big of a problem is this?
Well, I think it's substantial. I mean, you can see it when a lot of these people hold press conferences. You're talking about people like Maxine Waters, who's been in Congress, I don't know how many, 35 years, running committees, and when she was in the majority in Congress, and others who are running appropriations worth trillions of billions and hundreds of billions of dollars, spending taxpayer money. And they're being operated by staffs. They're not making judgments on their own, and so I think it is a very serious problem. So it's I think it's a matter. I don't think we can pass laws that say that at a certain age people shouldn't hold office. But I think that some of these people ought to make decisions to leave at their own will, and it's just so hard for them, John, because the perquisites of office are so immense that they can't let go. I mean, Pelosi, where was she? She was on a junket when she fell, wasn't she? She was on one of these lavish junkets where they coddle all the members of Congress. They put them on special Air Force planes to take them over to Europe, and they take them on these junkets where they're squired around by special people that are at our embassies, and they're taken care of in special places, and they're spoon-fed and everything else. So they're treated like princes and princesses, and so it's just hard for them to leave office. And if we remove some of these perquisites of office, I think some of them might leave. But until that happens, you're going to have this gerontocracy. So I think that's part of the problem with the office. if they had to go through TSA like you and I did, or if they had to pump their own gas, if they didn't have massive staffs taking care of them, if they didn't have all the perks and privileges of office, they might leave after 10 or 12 years instead of sticking around.
The book is Behind Closed Doors, available online at Amazon.com or your favorite bookstore. Ken Khachigian, thanks so much for stopping by. Happy New Year.
Thanks, John. Always great to be on your show.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, if you missed the first 2 hours of today's show and you want to find out what you missed out on, that's easy to do.
All you got to do is go to KABC.com, click on podcasts, go to the Apple Podcast app, iHeart, Spotify, search for The John Phillips Show, hit subscribe. You can download all the episodes. You can do a Google on the YouTube or get that handy-dandy KABC app. Search KABC AM in the Apple App Store or the Android Store. It's the easiest way to listen live to this radio station and download all the podcasts, including last hour, which starred Ulysses Hernandez.
Quite frankly,
and we're on the move in the Bay Area.
How cool is this? We do the Fix California Hour at 11 o'clock weeknights on KSFO in the Bay Area. And KSFO has moved from 560 to AM 810, which is a bigger, stronger signal you can hear all throughout Northern California. And at night, that signal is so powerful when the other stations power down, you can get it down here. So set your preset right next to 790, 810. And if you happen to be buzzing around at 11 o'clock at night, listen to the Fix California Hour.
We have a wind and fire update for you. If you're planning on picking someone up at Burbank Airport today, apparently many of the flights are being diverted to other airports. I assume that's because of the wind. I know when it's extremely windy out there, planes will go to a different nearby airport where it's not quite as windy and they can land in a safer way, and the airlines will typically arrange for a bus to pick you up at that airport and take you to the airport you were supposed to go to. Apparently, it is quite windy right now in Burbank, and flights headed to Burbank Bob Hope International Airport are being diverted to other nearby airports. So if you're planning on picking someone up, I would call the airline or check online and make sure that the flight is still supposed to land at Burbank and not being sent to LAX or Ontario or some other place. At the beginning of the show, we told you about the debacle that is high-speed rail in California. Despite the fact that everyone knows that it's a complete disaster, dare I say train wreck, Gavin Newsom keeps digging in his heels.
Gavin held a presser at the first laying of track for the project that has been under construction for 16 years. And he says all the naysayers, all the negative Nancys are wrong. High-speed rail is the way of the future. Meanwhile, Kevin Kiley in Congress is doing everything he can to defund the project federally.
For more, here's ABC 10.
Following his budget news, the governor announced updates to the controversial high-speed rail project. It comes as critics argue the project is way over budget and should be stopped. ABC 10's Jeannie Nguyen followed the governor's announcement and joins us now.
Becca, despite updates and progress to the high-speed rail project, Republican lawmakers are now introducing legislation to stop some funding. And tonight, the governor is responding to his critics and placing blame on the incoming president.
Wait, what did he have to do with this?
He's not even in office yet, but if he wants to kill high-speed rail, more power to him.
You know, most people that want to kill high-speed rail, it's not because, they don't like trains. It's because the people running this project have run it into the ground.
Yes, if you had 1% of competency, Donald Trump is the kind of guy who would be more than willing to spend money on it, considering he's a developer who loves to build things.
It's about damn time we have a high-speed rail system in the great state of California.
We voted for one almost 20 years ago.
And you people screwed it up.
On Monday, Governor Gavin Newsom, joined by other leaders, announced the latest successes with the ongoing California high-speed rail project, including a railhead project that would build a freight yard to receive more track material.
Finally, the point where we're going to start laying down the high-speed rail track after the track itself that will allow us to get the equipment and the track equipment specifically to lay down that track gets moved.
This thing's not happening in my lifetime, and I'm young.
No, and you know what? Do it. You have the money. You have the will from the voters. You've had more than enough time to do it. You haven't done it. At a certain point, the world recognizes that.
Joined by the Rail Authority's CEO, they announced a portion of the project is now complete, and the state has partnered with Brightline West, who built a rail route in Florida and is working on a project connecting Las Vegas to Southern California.
Imagine traveling from Palmdale in LA County to Victor Valley in San Bernardino in just 25 minutes.
Yeah. You could also drive.
Imagine that. Well, you can imagine it all you want because it's going to live inside your head, and that's it.
By the way, how much demand is there to go from Palmdale to Victorville?
It's pretty much the same place.
Just hours before Monday's news conference.
You got the Antelope Valley, you got the Apple Valley.
Just hours before Monday's news conference, Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley introduced a bill in Washington that would cut federal funding for the high-speed rail. Kiley says it's unrealistic to continue to spend money on this project.
I think it's unconscionable that we continue to throw billions of dollars at this failure of a project.
Is he always going to sound like a teenager?
You know what, though? It helps him in a contrast with everyone else in Congress.
That's true.
Would you rather be a teenager or would you rather be someone in hospice care?
I think it's unconscionable that we continue to throw billions of dollars at this failure of a project, which is never going to actually be built, just wasting people's money.
Governor Newsom admitted.
But think of all those, what Gavin always loves to say, look at all the jobs it created.
Oh, yeah. That's what the rail project was for, a jobs program.
Governor Newsom admitted there is a gap for funding this project, but said it's nothing that the state can't close. He responded to criticism by blaming one person.
Who's doing that? Oh, Trump, maybe, yeah. Oh, that's golden oldie.
Locally, Republicans...
There has been criticism of the high-speed rail debacle before Trump even got even close to thinking about wanting to be president the first time.
This shows you what their playbook is. They screw everything they touch up, and then they blame Trump. Because in a one-party state, that works for them. It's intellectually dishonest, and it is in no way based in the truth, but it's what they do because it works. Nothing in this state is going to change until you people start voting differently.
Locally, Republican Senator Roger Nilo agrees about the project's cost and has concerns about the long-term effects.
We have no idea where the money's coming from to fund either one of those segments, either the temporary segment or the final project.
By the way, where we could find a whole bunch of money to build this train immediately? Let's stop paying for every single homeless program in the state of California and see if the numbers change.
And you can throw the harm reduction services in there, too.
The final project.
A spokesperson for the High-Speed Rail Authority would not respond to the pending legislation, but did say it is committed in moving this project forward, adding it hopes to have the Merced to Bakersfield system operational by 2030 and 2033.
2033.
Mind you, it was supposed to be done entirely how many years ago?
It was supposed to be completely finished, LA to San Francisco in 2020. Instead, a line that goes from nowhere to less than nowhere will be done in 2033. And when they say Bakersfield, it's not Bakersfield. It's Wasco. And you know what's in Wasco? A prison.
A prison. Yep.
And so far, 436 miles of Phase 1 from San Francisco to Los Angeles are fully environmentally cleared.
So they have permits.
By the way, I think I sent Grandpa there when I sat on jury duty that month.
What does it say about California that for a project that California wants to build, that California voters voted for almost 20 years ago, took 16 years to get permits for?
But let's all have a press conference and thank each other for our leadership.
The High-Speed Rail Authority says more than $11 billion has been invested in this project, resulting in more than $14 billion in economic benefits to the Central Valley, adding that this project has created more than 14,000 jobs and 875 small businesses are working on this project, Becca.
Yes, but no bullet train from L.A. to San Francisco. You notice how that didn't even make it?
Are we paying all these crews just to wait until we get the permits before they can start working? What exactly have 14,000 people been doing?
Why even bother making them show up? If it's just a jobs program, just pay them to stay at home. If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. And Randy, you're monitoring the mailbag.
Blair writes in at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com with a suggestion. After thoroughly enjoying your Drop of the Year show, it occurs to me this year you guys should also do a Crime Blotter Story of the Year. So many of these stories are too good not to relive at least once.
Well, if you listen to KSFO at night, you'll hear it a second time.
And then probably over the holidays a third time.
I said, hell no, baby boy. Let me get up on out of here.
We get replayed more times than Gunsmoke.
We also get replayed here. I'm literally putting together a best of right now that airs at like either 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know. It comes on later. Changes every day.